Now, winter can be a fun time to play outside in the snow, as long as back inside people can switch their heaters on and off anytime they wish. But here in China, residents don't always have that choice. China has been using a regulated central heating system for decades, and when winter comes early, that can pose a problem. BON's Sylvia Gunawan explains.
Well, usually the heating system here in the capital is switched on every year on November 15th, and that's been the case for almost 60 years. But this year, Beijing's first snowfall came on October 31st, and that left some residents without heat, having to wrap up warm. November 15th might be one of the most anticipated days of the year here in parts of China. No matter how cold it gets prior to that date, millions of households have no choice but to return to their icy homes until that day arrives. But this year is an exception. For the first time, the government has ordered that the heat be switched on in Beijing 2 weeks early. With the first snowfall of the season coming sooner than expected, temperatures dropped to below freezing on the night of Halloween. It was the earliest snowfall for 22 years and the second earliest since records began. The government did admit it had induced the heavy snow to relieve the lingering effects of drought in the capital. But even though the heat has now been turned on, some people say their homes are still too cold.
I still don't have heating in my house. I have to use an electric blanket every night to keep myself warm.
Local reports say only about 1/3 of apartment buildings have actually experienced the central heating since it was turned on this past week, and it may take a few more days to bring heat to the remaining homes and offices. The director of the Beijing Heating Office, Guo Weiqi, says providing heat to the entire city is a gradual process. The department hopes to raise the temperature in every home to the required standard of 64 degrees within a few days. November 15th isn't the only key date in the heating calendar. Come March 15th, the heat will be turned off, again, no matter the temperature. The scheme was established in the 1950s by the Beijing municipal government, and it's based on an old Soviet system used throughout much of the communist world. According to its meteorological definition, winter officially begins when temperatures stay below 50 degrees for at least 5 consecutive days. But due to harsh economic conditions in the 1950s, the standard in Beijing was lowered considerably to just 41 degrees. In more northern parts of China, where it's much colder, heating is provided earlier in the year. But some southern cities, such as Shanghai and Hangzhou, have large areas without central heating, even though temperatures in Shanghai during winter can drop below freezing. While this system may seem strange to those in the West, here in China it's long been accepted as the norm. But some, though, still question if it's necessary to have the set dates.
Sometimes people are not in their homes, but the heating is still on, and it's just a waste. The government definitely needs to make some changes to this in the future.
I don't think the set dates are necessary. If it's still warm, we can delay the start date. But if it's cold, we should turn the heating on right away. Otherwise, we'll freeze to death.
Whatever happens in the future, the city's move to switch the heat on early has been hailed in some quarters as momentous change. The state-run China Daily newspaper also says the city has appropriated funds to supply electric heaters to families living in low-rise houses, so they no longer have to rely on coal to heat their homes. Meteorologists predict that there will be another cold front here in Beijing in the next couple of days. Until then, let's hope the heating office is working extra hard to bring heat into every home. Sylvia Gunawan, BON.
It was the heaviest snowfall in 22 years in this region, and it was all fake, essentially. This was created by the meteorological office. They seeded the clouds, essentially, which is what they often do in the summer to make it rain. They shot something like 84 packages of silver iodide into the air, but because it was cooler already, that moisture that came down instead of being rain was snow. This caused a lot of havoc, particularly here in Beijing. There were traffic jams everywhere. People couldn't get to work or school. Air travel was delayed. Something like 200 flights at Beijing Capital Airport were delayed for several hours. And generally, a lot of residents were caught off guard, and they were cold. They weren't prepared for this wintry condition. So now some local officials are under fire because of this.
Absolutely, but it's also important to remember that this is the strongest cold front to hit Beijing at this time of year in 40 years. There's also, obviously, the Meteorological Department aided the fall of the snowfall to try and ease the drought conditions in the area, but this was still a significant meteorological phenomenon which happened. And this severe drop in temperature has also been angering the residents, perhaps more than anything else. When you look at it, the temperatures have dropped so sharply, and it's such an early time in the year. This is really what's been causing the problems for residents at home as well. When you don't have the ability to change the heating in your own home, it does cause an awful lot of problems.
Well, it's good that the heat is on, because another cold front is on the way for this region in the very near future. So we will continue with Question of the Day in a moment.